Hey everybody, Keegan here, and today we're going to be talking about the indoctrination of today's youth. Okay, everybody, so before we get started, I'm very happy to have my buddy Nick Beal on. Nick and I have known each other for a couple years now, but we've only talked online, so this is the first time we've gotten to meet. We actually met up the other day right before Thanksgiving, so it's a pleasure to have you on, bud. And so today we're going to be talking about the indoctrination of the youth, and that is a very vast and wide, complex thing that we could get into. But before we do that, just so my audience out there can kind of know the kind of person Nick is, I'm just going to ask him some random ass questions about conspiracy theories. So, for instance, the first one would be Loch Ness monster. What is your opinion on the Loch Ness monster? Is it real? Not real? Is it just a toy boat? What's up?
Uh, I'm kind of back and forth on that one because I think anything's possible because it's so big. The sea's so big, so.
Have you ever heard the conspiracy that dinosaurs are fake, but dragons were real?
I have heard that one.
Do you know what was interesting about that is I heard that one of the things they found with dinosaur bones is that they'll find that the head is removed, and that they'll find dinosaur bones, but the head that belongs to the body, the skull, will be in some cases like 50 miles away from the original body. And they say the only animals or creatures that have ever existed on Earth that would actually detach a head and take it somewhere else as humans. And so there's people that think that like dinosaurs were really dragons, and that dragons were once hunted by humans, and that there's a whole conspiracy for us to not know that. Yeah, I could go. I'm gonna make a whole episode.
Yeah, I was gonna say I haven't dug that deep, but yeah.
But the second thing would be Bigfoot, Sasquatch.
Bigfoot, Sasquatch. I want to say I believe is a hard word for me, but that one I would lean toward. It's a bigger possibility than most of the conspiracies out there. Because I just think, like I said, with the Loch Ness Monster, there's a lot of room out there for it to be there. So I think we probably would have found something a little more solid by now.
Are you familiar with how in the turn of the 19th century, people thought gorillas were a myth? And that
Really?
we weren't able to like document and like prove that gorillas actually existed until the turn of the 19th century. I just found that out too. So for a long time, people thought gorillas were baloney. Yeah. So yeah, that's my whole thing about Bigfoot. But
that's very interesting.
The more you get into Bigfoot, the crazier that it becomes because people are like, it's interdimensional. They're aliens.
Yeah.
They're the missing link, but we can't even like find one of their bodies. So it's like just a bunch of like theoretical stuff about Sasquatch. But
they're like Neanderthals, but they're like really smart at the same time. So it's like I don't know. It's kind of a hard concept.
Ancient cultures all over the world talk about them and have different names for them and stuff.
Right,
but we can't seem to find one. So
especially what's the Russian one? I can't remember the name for it, but
I know in Florida it's swamp ape, and then in the Himalayan mountains it's like the abominable snowman.
Yeah.
You've got Yeti, Sasquatch, Bigfoot.
There's an actual like name for it in Russian. I'd have to look it up, but yeah.
But it's funny, in America we have just in America we have 3 different names. We call them either Bigfoot, Sasquatch. So Bigfoot is like the American word, Sasquatch is the Indian word, and then swamp ape in Florida. But they're just smaller.
That one I'm not even that familiar.
Oh yeah, it goes way back.
Swamp ape. But dangerously close to swamp ass, so I.
No, but that's what and apparently there's really clear photos. There's like people that have caught an orangutan in the Everglades.
Oh, really?
And they were like, we found the swamp ape, and they're like, no, that's just an orangutan that like escaped from the circus. But people are like that they think they found them and stuff before.
They're pretty convinced of it. Okay.
But the next thing on my list would be Dave Chappelle being a clone. Have you ever heard any of the clone stuff out there before?
Yeah, I've looked into the clone theory. It's out there. Like I said, I love to entertain the ideas, but I don't know if I would actually think that he was a clone. I just think that he When I first saw him come back for his first bit, I haven't watched all of his when he's
The Netflix special stuff.
I watched the first one, and when he came back, he looked like he was just not quite as comfortable as.
Oh, I can see that. Yeah.
And then somebody told me that he seemed more comfortable, and I was like, well, maybe I just haven't watched them all yet. But yeah,
Apparently, even his cousin says that's not him. Have you heard that?
Yeah, I haven't heard that.
Yeah, that's kind of what helped kind of start all that. That, and I think the Tequila, telling everybody that celebrities were being cloned and swapped out, and people are like, "That's funny because Dave Chappelle's cousin says that he doesn't think that's him." So it's just kind of interesting. But
I had heard about the Tequila one too.
That's some weird shit.
Yeah,
she's most famous
eye,
for exposing celebrity cloning centers.
Right.
I can't really think of anything else she's done. I think she did some porn or something. But again, I don't even know what she was famous for except for like having a MySpace page or something. But
maybe.
But thank you, Tequila. But yeah, so I mean, we can jump right in now to the indoctrination of youth, and I think that was one of your driving forces for wanting to come on, is because you've noticed kind of the changing of like the definitions of words. Like for instance, marriage used to be this thing that was seen as like major Christian concept, and then they took it and made gay marriage a thing that everybody was really rooting for. And what some people on the sidelines were saying was like, you can't change the definition of a word, because if you change the definition of a word, it's only going to be a matter of time before really clever lawyers and politicians start being able to change every word that's out there. And the problem with that is that people have like fought, bled, and died to make these words to have their definitions. So you can't just come by with a magic wand and change the meaning. And now it seems like even with racism, people out there think that like racism now means that like minorities are the only ones that can be victims of it, and that white people are the enforcers of racism, and that therefore white people can't be victims of racism.
Right.
So we have a big problem right now where little kids are growing up thinking that these are the definitions of these words. And I know that was one of your prime directives for wanting to come on, so I wanted to give you a minute to kind of talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, racism was actually a pretty good topic, because somewhere, like, I was trying to figure it out. I was like, I thought racism was just kind of prejudice. Like, as like I see somebody that looks at me differently, and then I prejudge them. Somewhere along the line, it turned from prejudice to prejudice plus power, and I'm not really sure. I'm thinking the '60s. I'm still trying to figure it out. But I've been looking into it, and it seems like a lot of different terms have been altered. And I want to say, like, I mean, just look at liberalism. It's not liberalism.
Right.
It used to be, freedom of opportunity,
Or well-read.
freedom of speech, and, civil rights. Now it's freedom of outcome, equality of outcome, censorship, which has come to now because they're trying to deplatform people like Alex Jones, which I think, that's a whole nother topic, but he was like a canary in the coal mine as far as like opening a loophole as far as they're just going to deplatform everybody now, because you deplatform the craziest. Now you can basically just go anywhere from there.
And you got people cheering it on too.
Yeah,
They're
because
like, this is
like,
great.
well,
Yes,
yeah.
censor this guy.
Exactly.
I don't like the stuff he says.
And that was the thing. It's like he had some crazy ideas, and it like I watched him from time to time, and he was entertaining. A lot of the stuff I didn't really agree with him on, or I didn't really believe. But at the same time, it's like once you deplatform the crazy one, which everybody was like kind of like, well, he had some dangerous ideas, so maybe it was a good idea. You justify that. You're opening a door to a lot of other
have you ever
stuff.
heard before? Unpopular speech should be the most protected because popular speech doesn't need protection.
Yes.
So the thing is, you've got to let the guy on the street corner yell his crazy stuff, because the opposite of that is nobody being allowed to say anything. You can't find a fine line because how do you enforce it?
Right.
You can't have people standing on the street corner saying, you can't say that. Hey, whoa. In time, it will be like that. In time, your neighbors will be able to report you on an app they got called like Word Watch. This person said some offensive words, and I'm bothered by it.
Well, it'd be like that Black Mirror episode, if you've ever seen that one. Oh, yeah. You just check it out.
What happens in that?
Basically, it gets to the society gets to the point where they're actually just judging each other based off of phones. So it's almost like a Yelp app for each interaction that you have with a person. So it's like, hey, I liked you today, so I'll give you a 5-star.
Are you familiar with the Sesame Credit?
Huh.
Okay, so in China now, they have this thing called Sesame Credit, and it was built by It was helped built by Mark Zuckerberg and Alibaba, which is the China or the Asian equivalent of Amazon. It's basically Amazon, but in Asia.
I have heard of
And
that. Yeah.
so they built this program that every person in the country is on this basically like a social network site. And everybody has one. The government issues you a social networks page. And the things you post, if you post good things and positive things, it increases your citizen score. If you post bad things, it decreases your score.
I have seen that.
Okay,
yeah,
so what will end up happening?
Okay.
So what they said was, we're not going to implement this till 2020, right? And they said, don't worry, this is basically to promote people being good, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they said there may be a chance that there might be some punishments for being bad, but then you get into the like, well, who gets to decide? Well, the Chinese government.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were to post, let's say, things about 9/11 being an inside job, this may or may not deter your citizen ranking score. And they said the punishments could be things like not being able to get a government approved job and then
Right.
not being able to travel. And so, but the positive things would be like you might get extra vacation time or whatever. And the thing was, this is not, you can't volunteer for this. This is mandatory. So if you had somebody that said, well, I might have one of those pages, I'm not going to use it, you will get a low score.
Right.
And then what happens,
Right.
what they did was they made it, this is so nuts, but they made it to where if you're friends with somebody with a low score, that'll lower your score.
Yep.
So it actually, they found a way, instead of getting the government to censor people or people to censor people, they found a way to get people to censor themselves, because people don't want to lose their ability to be able to go on vacation and stuff. And what is crazy is that they said they weren't going to implement this till 2020. They started it last year. And they said this year 16,000 people have been denied being able to travel on airplanes because of their low Sesame Credit score. And this is being made by the same people that made Facebook and stuff. So it's only a matter of time before it comes
That's
here.
how it was in the episode. It was basically like nobody wanted to talk to the guy with 2 stars. It's like, oh, shit.
I have a feeling that show is them straight up. It's like
kinda-
like if
yeah.
Alex Jones and David Ike
Yeah.
directed Tales from the Crypt or
Right.
something. It's like totally like shit
I'd
that
watch
could
it.
probably
Yeah.
happen, you know?
But anyway, back to the terms about like equity was another one. Equality of outcome. When people hear that, when I first heard that, I was kind of like, okay, well, you know, if we all banded together and we just if the world got together and just kind of worked together, and just it sounds good, right? Like we kind of figured things out, work together, and we try to go toward the same goal. But the way you kind of unpack that and you play that out, it gets really, really dangerous. And you see what happened in like the Soviet Union. And we don't hear about the Soviet Union. That's one of the things I want to talk about is the fact that we hear so much about Germany. We hear so much about the Nazis. We hear so much about Hitler. Holy crap, how many times I've been called Hitler myself.
Yeah, but they don't want you talking about Stalin
But
and,
yeah,
or
somehow
Karl
like
Marx.
communism was like kind of like an okay thing, but they don't realize the death toll. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's like comparing like a school shooting to like the shootings in Chicago. You know, it's like you're seeing a lot in Chicago, but it it kind of just happens. But you have this one big incident that it's like, oh shit, that's the one. We can't have that. That's what it kind of reminds me of. As far as like the Soviet Union, we don't really learn a lot of that in school. We learned pretty much almost every class I had in the university was like about fascism, about Nazi Germany.
Right.
As far as like we kind of brushed over communism a little bit, but we never talked about exactly like how it came about, why it failed, and how many people it actually killed. I want to say Nazi Germany was what, like 20 million, something like that. With communism, what are you, 150 million?
I know that I've heard before that it's impossible to even know how much communism
really
is
is.
killed, where you can actually break down how much Nazi Germany killed. So
Exactly.
It's I think democide is the name of when governments are involved in control of killing populations and stuff.
Right.
And
right.
What was it? You have genocide, then you have megadeath, and then there's actually a name for what it's called when you like eradicate a group of people, the entire race of a people, or the whole country of a people. Like
Right.
there's different numbers for how many people you kill in that population, and democide is the largest contributor of death, and it's government sanctioned killing.
Yeah, and that's basically what you saw. I mean, people like how many? 100, 150 million, something like that, somewhere in that area.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
And that's what it was. It wasn't just one big incident. It was stretched over a lot of years. And what it started with was collectivizing everything, in my opinion. You collectivize the farms, then you pretty much snuff out all the competition. They don't really know how to run the farms after that. A lot of people died because they killed off all these successful farmers.
Well, so that's the thing. So like with capitalism, you can't really have equality. And the reason why is because this is why you have like sports athletes, they get paid millions of dollars when teachers only get paid like a small percentage of that. And it's the supply and demand thing.
Right.
And the thing is, sports athletes, they get paid that much money because we allow them to get paid that much money because people are willing to pay this much of their wealth to be able to witness these people play these sports or whatever. But in the long run, what that does is it drives human innovation. When you allow people to thrive and to become famous and to do stuff, they do miraculous, crazy things. And when you don't do that, when the government takes control of how society works like that, you find that people only work just hard enough to get along. So when you run your own farm, you'll produce the best produce you possibly can. But when when the government is now in control of your farm, you're like, screw them. I'm not going to put in all this extra effort to not see the fruits of my labor, literally.
It destroys incentive, absolutely. And the other thing, too, is I had showed you the Pareto Distribution. So the Pareto Distribution, just to kind of break it down a little bit, it's an interesting phenomenon. It's basically where you take a sum total, say 100 people, of they're trying to compose something. So say it's like music. So you have 100 composers of music. You take the square root of that sum total. So 10 of them, they produce half of the total of the compositions. So you think about that, and that's an inevitable phenomenon. You try to put that into Marxist theory, it completely falls apart. And that's why I think, the neo-Marxists, postmodernists, whatever you want to call them now, even though that's kind of a contradiction and that's a long story in itself, but postmodernism has adopted this neo-Marxist idea to where it's just, you just got to flatten out all these hierarchies, and that's their idea. The problem with capitalism is you inevitably end up with this hierarchy of the 1% and the 99%, because it inevitably, the spoils go to a limited few.
I did want to put a bookmark in to talking about communism, and only because we could sit here all day and be like, communism's bad because of this, and the government's bad, so I'm not cool with them, and etc. And we could talk about capitalism and how great it is, but we don't even live in like a capitalist system right now because we have like banker bailouts and too big to fail and etc. But what I think we really wanted to get into today was what is happening right now with like our culture and how they have taken these tactics that are right out of the Karl Marx book, Communist Manifesto, and they're using it now. So it doesn't matter if capitalism or communism is good or bad. What's happening to our culture is crazy, and and I don't want to say it's never been seen before, but it hasn't been done like this, and we haven't seen this clash like we have in the United States. And I know we did see glimpses of it during the Civil Rights Movement, and we saw glimpses of it and stuff. And there was the Revolutionary War and the Civil War and stuff where we had Americans that were fighting with each other. But this is the most civil war I think I could see, where we have people that are like yelling at. I was basically saying it's the equivalent of like people are smoking cigarettes and other people are splashing buckets of water on them saying that's bad for you. So it's almost like we're attacking each other because we're concerned about one another. And so I know there's an old Karl Marx tactic, and it's something like speak louder than the other person and claim victim. So one of the things you're seeing right now is people are fighting, like the social justice warriors and the conservative, the young conservative crowds are fighting over each other. And while one group is saying freedom of speech, the other group is saying freedom of speech is hate speech. And when you start saying But how could that be where like I'm okay with you talking. I want to hear what you have to say. And they start going, look, this person is being a bad person, and they're speaking louder than the other person, and they're claiming victim. And people have herd mentality. People want to be in groups. People don't want to feel isolated.
Yeah.
So when they hear somebody saying someone is a victim, they go, well, I don't want to be an oppressor. I'm going to join that group. So you see this herd mentality. And I was talking about earlier how like white guys are being told that they're racist so much and so often that it makes guys like you and I bump into each other and go, I ain't racist, you racist? No, I ain't racist. Hey, we should stick together and make sure that nobody calls us racist. And it forces tribalism. And that's what they're doing. They're yelling and nagging at us so much that it is causing us to band together and say, screw that. And so we've got to meet halfway on this. We can't let this run away. And that's the thing. I don't unfriend people on Facebook when they disagree with me. Absolutely. And I got people that beg me, just unfriend that person. And I'm like, you don't understand. If we stop talking to each other, groups like mine and groups like theirs are only going to keep talking about how bad the other one is, and it becomes an echo chamber.
Yep.
And this is what the Illuminati want. They want to divide and conquer us. That's why George Soros will pay money to groups like Occupy and Black Lives Matter and all this stuff at the same time, because they want us constantly fighting one another. And I know one of the main reasons why you wanted to come on today was you were talking about how this virtue signaling and social justice warrior stuff it's good in nature, it's good spirited,
they mean
but
well.
It's destroying things like comedy.
Yeah.
And how comedy is one of the last bastions of freedom and freedom of speech. You know, even back in the days of kings, you had the court jester. And he was allowed to say things and get away with things that other people couldn't say because they knew that it was funny. It was meant to be a good joke. But now you got people like, I had written in my notes here, Jerry Seinfeld quoted as saying that his daughter, he was driving with his daughter, he was with her at lunch. And he said, you met any cute boys in college? And she was like, what does that mean, Dad? What do you mean by that? And Jerry Seinfeld saying it's impossible for him to do shows now at like college, university campuses and stuff because they will run you out of there with torches and shit.
You're walking on eggshells.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, going back to just like the Marxist, like just the method of like trying to shut people down and all that, I think that comes from the methodology from it. It's oppressor versus oppressed. It's like that power dynamics. Like,
right.
Well, you have to claim a certain amount of victimhood now because like your identity and the people of that identity have been oppressed in the past, so you have more of a virtue and you have more of a voice. So it's kind of like people like us, since we're, I guess, cisgender white male dudes, I guess we're, you know, just on the bottom of the totem pole, and I guess, and it's
we're
like,
the least depressed people out there,
whatever. But I mean,
to,
like we weren't a part of this. Like we don't wish ill on anybody. Like we just and it's a very toxic method. And once you play that game, once you play it out, like I was telling you earlier, it just, you end up with, well, you're you, and I'm me, because I have like 100 different identifications for myself, and it's getting messy. So let's just keep it to you. You're the individual. I'm an individual. Just keep it to that, and we're right back to the Constitution.
Dude, well, and like, you know, they want to think that there's some people out there that are like, yes, two genders, guys, girls. I mean, I get it. And then people are like, well, what about hermaphrodites? And you're like, well, okay. On occasion, I see that, and yada yada yada.
Exactly.
The thing is, none of that mattered until the media brought up the bathroom issue. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, everybody was an expert on chromosomes, and you know, and they were like, dude, Facebook just added 50 different things. And, you know, people out there want to be individuals, right? So they see that Facebook offers 50 different gender specifications. They go, I want to be an individual. I'm going to pick, let me see here, animal friendly or whatever. They're all like, but the thing is, the more you let the government let you be individual, the more you all end up looking the same to me. And before you know it, like it's not going to be cool to identify as a male or female. You got to be an Apache helicopter. And I'm not trying to talk crap on people that identify as that kind of stuff. But I'm just saying for people like me, I should be allowed to say, I think that's freaking ridiculous if I want to. And I'm not saying if you do that, I think it's ridiculous. And I definitely don't think that you don't have the right to do it. You can, I mean, just be whoever you want to be. Just don't tell me I can't be what I want to be, dude.
And don't impose it on legislation. And don't let it,
or like the school system here in Washington State, it's something crazy now where like at the age of, I think it's the 3rd grade now, they are telling kids that you can, that that gender is a social construct. And
That's-
I know when I was a kid, I wouldn't have known what the hell they were talking about.
It's already
dude.
confusing
And,
as hell as it
and
is.
these
It's
kids
like-
are gonna come home from school and be mom, dad. I'm gonna start calling dad mom and mom dad, and if you say anything, they'll like report you to CPS or
Yeah,
something.
that's
It's
where it
gonna
becomes
get
dangerous.
crazy. Yeah.
Well, have
So-
you heard of the gender unicorn?
I
Look
know the
that one
purple
up.
penguins. I know there's like a school in California where all the boys and girls are just called purple penguins.
It's similar.
Okay, that's yeah.
The gender
So-
unicorn is basically you get to just they're trying to teach kids at a young age.
And the
It's
thing
all
is,
subjective.
when you're talking about indoctrination, we are forced to send our kids to public school. And we have to send them there if we can't afford to send them to private schools.
right, and private schools
And
are expensive.
And I'm
yeah.
and I'm thankful that we at least have that option. But mostly, what's going on, and I mean, this goes. You could go back to the women's liberation movement. If you watch the movie America: Freedom to Fascism with Aaron Russo, are you familiar with him?
For the name.
He ran for governor of Nevada back in the day. He was like engaged to Elizabeth Taylor and stuff. But he made a movie called America: Freedom to Fascism. The whole point of the movie was that there's no law that states you have to pay an income tax on your labor.
Okay.
And if you watch the special features he did for his movie, Alex Jones actually interviewed him. And he talked there was like an hour-long interview. And one of the things he said is that the women's rights movement was funded by the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds. And the reason why is it wasn't that the women's rights movement wasn't an organic thing, and it should have happened, right? But it was funded by the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds so they could get women into fight, to want to work, to get into the workforce, because they were like, you're an independent girl, you can be your own person, do your own thing.
Yeah.
So the women would be begging, let us work. We want to get paid what men get paid and all this stuff. So they'd get women to want to riot to be able to work. So the government could charge them an illegal income tax on their labor, which is like 35% of what you would make in a year at the time. And when the women started going back and started going into the workforce, it caused the children to have to go to school at a younger age so they could be indoctrinated by the system earlier and earlier. So the whole thing, it started out as a healthy organic movement, but it was funded by the freaking Illuminati so they could not only get women to work and charge them an income tax and beg for it, but to get children into the school system earlier. And now, if you don't send your kid to school, they'll take your kid from you. If you send your kid to school, they start telling your kid that mommy and daddy are like bad or dangerous or like a threat to their well-being and stuff. I've seen the documentaries before where cops walk around a classroom and they're like, hey, does mommy and daddy have a gun? Does mommy and daddy have any drugs in the house? And he's all, here's our cards. And they tell the kids, if you get us information that leads to an arrest, you can get up to $500. And the looks on all these kids are like, wow!
That sounds like a South Park. I think there was a South Park episode on that one. Like close to it.
Oh, it wouldn't even surprise me
yeah,
because
yeah.
things are getting that ridiculous. But I wanted to know if you wanted to say anything before we wrap things up. It's been a pleasure having you on.
For sure.
I wanted to say that right now what we're seeing, I think, is what I like to call like a grand awakening. And this isn't bad that people are getting involved and wanting to stick up for different minority groups or whatever. None of this is bad. What's happening though is that I think the grand awakening is happening so fast and that people aren't quite aware of like current laws or how the Constitution works, and they don't realize that some of their friends do know how these things work and they do know why these systems were put in place. So it's not that it's bad, it's good that everybody's waking up, because back in the day nobody cared what the government was doing. Nobody cared that other people were getting screwed over. They just wanted to watch MTV or NFL and drank their GMO and do all their stuff. But now people, they have a passion to like want to help. And you're seeing stuff like the ice bucket challenge and all this stuff. And what people don't realize is that when you do things like virtue signal or ice bucket challenge, right? Something that like, it may be for a good cause, but you didn't really have to do anything, right? It uses up a part of your willingness to want to help out throughout the rest of the year. So there's something like on average, people only help a certain percentage with their free time. But when they do things like these like Facebook charity things and all this stuff, a part of them goes, oh, I did my contribution for the year. And so what I'm saying is that it's good that people are waking up. we just need to have patience and be willing to talk to each other and not write each other off and say, oh, it's hopeless. We need to be able to keep the conversation going.
And direct the virtue in the right direction.
Yeah. But, I mean, do you have anything you wanted to say in the meantime?
Yeah, just, on a positive note, like, the reason why I'm so into this is because I want to get into comedy. I love making people laugh. I love to laugh. I think it's one of the best parts of life. And it's like, it's an absolute for me. It's simple, It's, it doesn't, I mean, obviously you could get into controversial comedy, and especially in this day and age, in 2018, but,
America.
Exactly. But I think one of the best ways to expose some of the stuff that's going on right now is comedy.
Totally.
If you guys haven't heard of the Joe Rogan podcast with Peter Boghossian and James Lindsay, they did a really good one. It's basically the best trolling of the academic world that the funny thing is I thought about doing it a long time ago, but I don't really have the bright intellect for it. I figure I probably could get it across, but if you haven't checked it out, it's a really good interview. Basically, they trolled the academic world, and they did it in such a way that was hilarious. And I think it's gaining a lot of attention because of how funny it was.
Oh, cool.
And right. Because of it, I mean, I think people are starting to wake up a little bit, and it's like, oh, okay, well, this is pretty absurd. It's getting kind of out of hand, and maybe we should kind of like.
Well, I saw a thing with Steve Carell. Steve Carell said that you couldn't remake some of his movies in today's climate because of the social justice warrior movement. And like he's talking about like 40-Year-Old Virgin. He's saying you couldn't remake that movie now. It'd be too offensive.
It would be too offensive.
What the?
And it's like,
I don't even think he's that funny.
It's and if we let this get out of hand, it's gonna kill comedy. And it's like, man, I can't let that happen. Right. I love comedy. It's my life, I love it. So, and I want to have kids someday, and I don't want them to grow up. And you just had a kid, so it's like I want to see them grow up in a world where it's like
you can laugh.
I don't even want to.
You can laugh out loud at stuff that's funny.
Exactly, and you don't even want to put them into the school system because you're afraid that what they're going to get taught. So it's like I don't want to see that. So I hope people kind of just start listening a little bit.
Well, dude, it's been a pleasure having you on, and it's been so good to get to meet you.
Yeah.
And I'm Keegan. This is Nick. And in the meantime, don't you roll your eyes at us.